Imagine this. You're walking home from work one night and you're looking at some photos that you took on your lunch break. You're looking through them because you took a picture of what you thought was a UFO. But as you're going through them, you get the sneaking suspicion that you're being followed. So you look around, and when you look over your shoulder, you notice a man in an all-black suit with a fedora following closely behind. You try to get a second look at him to see if you can figure out anything about him, but he doesn't actually have any real defining facial features. So you pick up the pace a little bit and you turn a nearby corner. When you look back again, however, the man is nowhere to be found. Later on, when you get home, your phone starts to ring off the hook, and every time that you answer, all that's on the other end is either heavy breathing or dead silence. After the third or fourth call, you get a knock on the front door. So, as you walk over slowly to open the front door, you're met with the man from before. Except this time, he's telling you that he's a federal agent and he wants to talk to you about what you saw earlier that day. So, you begrudgingly invite him into your house and you tell him everything that you know. But before leaving, he takes all of the evidence and leaves you with a warning. If you tell anyone you know about this meeting or what you saw, you will be in grave danger. This same exact encounter has been reported several times over the last 50 or 60 years, and it's started to coin these strange men with the name Men in Black. No one knows who they are or where they came from, but they seem to arrive at instances where people have witnessed unexplained aircraft or creatures to silence them. On this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Men in Black and some possible theories as to who they are and where they came from. I'm Alex Morell, and this is Odd Encounters. So, who are the Men in Black? Well, according to popular theory, the Men in Black are a group of federal agents who show up around unexplainable phenomena to gather evidence and suppress any would-be whistleblowers. But those who have actually encountered the Men in Black describe the experience as utterly terrifying. The Men in Black will resort to fear-mongering, stalking, harassment, kidnapping, and in some extreme cases, even murder if the eyewitness refuses to comply. Those who have had a first-hand encounter with the Men in Black claim that the room fills up with this stench of sulfur, and then all of a sudden they feel this impending doom. Some of them have even reported feeling a sense of delirium or confusion during the interaction. A lot of them have also gotten sick after the interactions and even been hospitalized. Now, the Men in Black also don't seem to have any kind of defining facial features like eyebrows or beards or hair, and most people that have seen them claim that the only real defining features are their large black eyes and their pale skin. All of this is accompanied by a really strange set of behaviors. They speak in a very broken dialect, almost like what you would expect from a toddler who's learning a language. And whenever they're offered any kind of food or water, they struggle to eat it or drink it. They basically put the food in their mouth, chew it up, and then let it fall right back out, or if they try to drink something, they'll just pour it all over themselves. They also don't really seem to have any physical body language. They make very little body movements, and they don't typically make any facial expressions when speaking. All of these behavior patterns together honestly make them sound more like some kind of robot or an alien as opposed to an actual person. And these aren't just recent. Sightings of the Men in Black have been reported as far back as 1947. The first mention of the Men in Black comes from the Roswell incident of 1947. It was a clear night in the desert of Roswell, New Mexico, and reports had been coming into the local sheriff department about a strange aircraft that emitted a bright light flying around over the desert. But shortly after the reports came in, the aircraft took a fiery plunge to the desert below. It happened to land on a farmer named Mac Brazel's farm, and when he found the debris, he brought it to the sheriff department. But the sheriff wasn't quite sure what to do with the wreckage, and so he turned it over to the Roswell Air Force Base. Now, according to the official story, it was simply an experimental balloon designed for intelligence gathering as part of Project Mogul. However, several eyewitnesses that saw the craft reported it as a disc-shaped object, not a hexagonal balloon like the official story said. And some of the eyewitnesses were actually there when the aircraft crashed. Shortly after this unfolded, Roswell sent out an investigation team to the crash site. But the soldiers who were sent to investigate the crash site supposedly weren't alone. They were accompanied by a group of men in black suits, and at the time, no one had heard of the men in black, let alone ever even met one. So it was clear that they were there for a reason, and that was to create a strict perimeter around the crash site and to silence any eyewitnesses by telling them that it was nothing more than a weather balloon. Shortly after any remaining evidence of the crash was cleaned up, the men, along with the debris, vanished into the night. But they couldn't stop news from spreading, and the next morning there were already hundreds of articles published about how the Air Force had captured a UFO in Roswell, New Mexico. Some of the articles even made mention about how the debris was turned over to Jesse Marcel, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who had handled projects like Operation Crossroads, to investigate the debris. Files detailing the investigation, the craft was described as a 20-foot hexagonal object, but the description couldn't be confirmed. The U.S. Air Force was quick to make public statements to the press, claiming that it was recovered pieces of an experimental balloon. And so, the incident was largely forgotten about, until 1978, when that same Jesse Marcel, who was now retired, came forward to state that he believed the craft was extraterrestrial. As for the mysterious men in suits, nobody heard from them again. That is, until several years later when they made an appearance in Connecticut. The year is 1953, and several men in black have just arrived in the bustling town of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Their target? Albert K. Bender, the chief timekeeper of the Acme Shear Company. On the outside, Albert was an ordinary person who worked his 9 to 5 and then went back to his attic room at 784 Broad Street. But as those that were close describe him, he was absolutely obsessed with anything supernatural and kept the walls of his attic room adorned with shrunken heads, faux skulls, and hundreds of clocks all over the room, which I assume is probably some kind of joke based on the fact that he was a timekeeper. But what exactly could the men in black want with Albert? I mean, he's a relatively normal guy aside from that obsession, right? Maybe it was information, because the year before that, in 1952, Albert K. Bender and a co-worker, Max Krengle, created the International Flying Saucer Bureau. The IFSB, for short, was created as a way to try to bring UFO researchers closer together. At its height, it had about 600 members and was releasing quarterly newsletters that contained UFO encounters and stories as well as research and theories. But shortly after its creation in 1952, Albert claims to have been stalked at a local theater by a man in an all-black suit with glowing eyes. On another occasion, he claims that he was hypnotized on the street in front of his house. After these two encounters, he started to notice the smell of burning sulfur in his attic, but he didn't really have any more definitive proof for his encounters. That is until he took his research in a new direction. He decided that he would combine his knowledge of the paranormal with his research of UFOs and prompted the readers of Space Review, the quarterly newsletter that was sent out by the IFSB, with a bizarre request: to telepathically memorize and recite a message that Albert had written himself, that they would all join together on March 15, 1953 to send out telepathically. The date was referred to as C-Day, and when the day finally arrived, the IFSB sent out their message. Quote, "Calling occupants of interplanetary craft that have been observing our planet Earth. We of the IFSB wish to make contact with you. We are your friends," end quote. But to Albert's surprise, the unexplained events that were happening at his house actually began to worsen. A yellow thick fog materialized in his attic room, and he even started to develop some health problems. On one event, he states that he actually received a telepathic message that said, "Stop delving into matters that aren't your concern." Even with the telepathic messages and the nausea and the constant harassment, Albert K. Bender stayed determined to publish his research. So, in the July edition of Space Review, he released a message that said the next issue would have a, quote, shocking revelation. However, the next issue was never actually released, and shortly after that message, he received a visit from the Men in Black. He was by himself in his attic room when, to his surprise, 3 men in black suits entered the room, and shortly after, the room filled with a yellow thick fog. He said he was overwhelmed with a sense of confusion and disorientation, all while the men were repeatedly making the statement that he was to cease his research and to shut down the IFSB. However, shortly before leaving, the men confiscated several copies of Space Review as well as searched around his room, and then they left. But Albert K. Bender's health started to worsen after this, and he started to suffer from nausea, migraines, and other health issues. At this point, the Men in Black paid Albert several more visits, repeatedly trying to silence him and the IFSB. But in October, nearly a year and a half after the organization was founded, the final issue of Space Review was released, and it contained one last cryptic message for its audience. Quote, "The mystery of flying saucers is no longer a mystery." End quote. According to the Union of International Associations, the IFSB was forcibly shut down in 1953, and according to Albert Bender, the Men in Black disappeared along with his organization. So if the goal really was to silence the IFSB, then it seems like the Men in Black must have accomplished that goal. Or did he get too close to the truth and they just wanted to make an example out of him? Either way, several more years would go by before the Men in Black showed up again in a rather unexpected place. The year is 1966 in the small quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and one of the most infamous cryptid encounters to date is about to unfold. It's one of my favorite cryptids and one that many of you may recognize as well, the Mothman. It's rumored that the Mothman lived in the West Virginia Ordnance Works, which has since been nicknamed the TNT area. It was originally used as a munitions production and storage warehouse during World War II, but it was decommissioned in the 40s, and after it laid abandoned for a long time, it eventually became a popular hangout spot for teenagers. And so, on November 15th, 1966, Linda Scarberry and 3 other teenagers were hanging out at the TNT area when they noticed something in the headlights of their car. It was a 7-foot-tall, humanoid-looking creature with wings and large red eyes. It scared the group of teens, and so they decided to run, and only made it about a half-mile up the road before it gave chase. Apparently, they were driving at about 100 miles an hour, and it landed on the roof of the car and started flapping its wings on the car, as well as left multiple scratch marks on the roof and side of the car. So, the teens, presumably scared, drove to the sheriff's office and recounted the details of their encounter to the sheriff. The sheriff didn't exactly believe them at first, but he also knew that they weren't really the kind of teens to cause trouble, and so he decided to go and look for himself. He drove out to the TNT area and didn't find any sign of the Mothman, but he did find an interesting set of tracks. He described them as a set of tracks looking like 2 horseshoes that were stuck together, so I'm imagining something similar to like a W shape. However, the news about the encounter with Mothman didn't stay local for long. It went nationwide almost overnight, and reports started flooding in from all over Point Pleasant about the Mothman. It was stealing people's pets out of their yards, it was following people, it was showing up in people's front yards, and so the legend of the Mothman started to grow. But Mothman wasn't the only uninvited guest in Point Pleasant, because another group of visitors showed up wearing black suits. The men harassed, stalked, and questioned multiple residents of Point Pleasant for any information that they had regarding the Mothman. They also seized any and all photo evidence that they could get their hands on. The residents would be terrorized for another 13 months before the entire event turned disastrous with the collapse of the Silver Bridge that left 46 people dead. But with the collapse of the bridge, the Men in Black and the Mothman both simultaneously disappeared. However, the Men in Black didn't stay gone. Since the 1960s, there have been hundreds of reports from all around the world detailing encounters with the Men in Black. It seems that they typically show up after somebody reports an unexplained event like sighting a cryptid, or a UFO, or some other adjacent phenomena like a portal opening up in the sky. It seems they've been spotted a few times in recent years as well. With most of the stories of the Men in Black being from eyewitness accounts, it's very hard to prove their existence. However, several photos and videos have surfaced online that claim to show these supposed Men in Black. In the video that I'm about to show you, a woman has an incredibly uncanny interaction with a man who seems to fit the description. For whatever reason, after the encounter, she never returned to work. And after failing to return to work, the business security guard filmed what he saw from the CCTV and posted it online. For whatever reason, this encounter freaks me out a little bit, but I want to see what you guys think.
There he is. Okay, so now they're talking. Now they're talking. Okay, so now she shook her head. She's pointing her finger. I don't know if she's giving him directions or telling him to leave. Now she's going. Now she gets the office gun, so it's obvious that she doesn't feel comfortable. Now watch his hand. Watch his hand. Then she turns around and puts it down on the counter. Then he points at her. So she goes to her purse, and I paused it right here, and that's a camera. She got a camera out of her purse. And then she walks around. So she completely changed her demeanor. And then they leave. So keep it.
In the video, we can see that the woman grabs a handgun from her desk almost as if she's getting ready to defend herself before the man makes a strange hand movement. It's almost as if he disarms her, maybe telepathically, similar to the encounters that previous witnesses had. She also had a camera in her purse, so maybe she captured photos of something unexplainable prior to this encounter. What do you think? The next video was recorded by security cameras at a hotel near Niagara Falls. Prior to the encounter with the strange men, hotel manager Shane Sovar and a security guard reported seeing a large triangular UFO outside of the hotel. And so, a group called the Aerial Phenomenon Investigations Team came out to look into the report. They documented the story and gathered any evidence that they could find. A few weeks later, 3 hotel guests saw 2 strange men enter the building. The men apparently caused everyone, including the staff, to feel uncomfortable as soon as they entered, and shortly after, the men began asking to speak with Shane and the security guard. The strange men's entry was caught on camera, but this is the only video that we have from the encounter. Thankfully, neither Shane nor the security guard were there that day, as the Men in Black seemed to use violent tactics as a way to coerce people into cooperating. The 2 men disappeared and never returned, presumably because Shane had no evidence of his encounter other than one other eyewitness. The last photo that I want to show you is a photo that was captured by a man named Timothy Beckley. In 1968, Jack Robinson, a UFO researcher, and his wife were stalked by a man in a black suit. They saw the man 3 days in a row standing across the street watching their apartment. They had sworn that their apartment had been rummaged through while they were at work, and so Jack's friend Timothy hung outside of the apartment and managed to capture a photo of the strange man leaving the apartment. This was the photo that he took. After these events took place, the man wasn't seen again. Perhaps he broke into their apartment and found what he was looking for, or maybe he didn't find anything at all. And for those of you that aren't watching this on YouTube, I'll be posting all of the photos and videos from this episode on my Instagram. But if the Men in Black do exist, what is their motive for silencing witnesses? And where did they come from? Well, It's not unlikely that they would work for some sort of government organization, as most governments on the planet have some sort of secret organization that handles intelligence gathering. And a lot of times, those agencies compete with foreign agencies. For example, the CIA in America would often compete with agencies like the SVR in Russia or the MSS in China for control of the world security sector. Their goal is to achieve advancements in technology and science before the competitor can. So maybe the Men in Black operate the same way. They may be gathering intel on the unexplained in an attempt to exploit it and then simultaneously force witnesses into silence to avoid a foreign agency from getting their hands on that same information. The likelihood of the Men in Black working for an agency like the CIA or the NSA is actually pretty high. But what if they belong to their own organization entirely? The most popular theory for the origin of the Men in Black actually starts with an agency that's so elusive, no other federal agency has ever been able to put forth definitive proof of its existence. I'm talking about Magic 12, otherwise known as the Majestic 12. It's a secret committee of the world's top scientists, government officials, and military leaders that was founded under executive order by US President Harry S. Truman. Supposedly, the 12 committee members were also granted a security clearance known as Magic Clearance that would allow them to be the only people that had access to vital information regarding the topic of the Majestic 12. And while Magic isn't exactly a known security clearances can have other attachments with them, such as no foreign, which means even if a foreign agency has the same security level that's required to view the documents and they're in good standing with the agency that owns the documents, they can't actually view them. But why would Truman need a secret committee to study UFOs when he was already working with the United States Air Force on Project Blue Book, a top secret project focused on the recovery and investigation of UFOs? Well, to answer that question, it might be important to actually look at the events that led up to the supposed creation of the Majestic 12. At the time, the Cold War was just beginning, and most of the intelligence agencies that existed couldn't provide reliable intel. And so, Truman, seeing a need for good intel, passed the National Security Act of 1947. This supposedly created the Majestic 12, as well as gave more authority to a group known as the Central Intelligence Group. That group eventually collected all of its efforts in and renamed itself to the Central Intelligence Agency. However, most people think that this wasn't Truman's idea, but actually former President Dwight D. Eisenhower. According to some whistleblowers, Dwight D. Eisenhower hosted several secret meetings with extraterrestrials in which several different deals were brokered between the United States and those extraterrestrials. In one of the meetings, the extraterrestrials offered alien technology in exchange for the US giving up its nuclear weapons program. However, Eisenhower ultimately declined because he feared that the Russians wouldn't do the same. This ended up leading to years of controversy and conspiracy surrounding the Eisenhower and Truman presidencies. But eventually Truman inherited the Oval Office, and whether he inherited the Majestic 12 or he created them, it's most likely that they were left behind as a way to handle those meetings with the extraterrestrials. Eventually, the Central Intelligence Agency would take over on all of the investigations of UFOs, and the Majestic 12 seemingly fades into the past. But what actually happened to the Majestic 12? It's hard to say what actually happened, as the only evidence we have of the existence of the Majestic 12 didn't show up until 1988. When two FBI offices received a copy of a document labeled Operation Majestic 12. It first arrived as a roll of 35mm film before it was developed and turned over. In the pages there are several accounts of UFO encounters as well as a list of the committee members. The FBI turned the documents over to the Air Force and they launched a full investigation into the documents as well as the person who left them behind. After scouring the pages for any valuable information, it was determined that the documents weren't credible. However, even with the cooperation of the FBI, the person who left these pages behind was never found, leading many to believe that the documents could hold some level of authenticity. On the other hand, Some argue that this is part of a larger hoax or disinformation campaign. With no other known evidence of the Majestic 12, the trail basically goes cold, which leads us to our next question. Who else could be responsible? So if it's not the Majestic 12, then is it the aforementioned CIA? Whenever you look at any of the horrific experimentation or insane conspiracy theories with aliens, the CIA comes up more often than any other government agency. And just to put a scope on how insane the CIA projects can actually be, we can reference Project MK Ultra. This was a top secret program that was highly classified, where the CIA used a variety of drugs to basically try to control the human mind, so for lack of a better term, mind control. But they even went as far as hiring World War II Nazis who specialized in human torture. But they needed subjects to test this on, and so they went to the American prison system and forced the inmates from several different prisons to be a part of the trials for MK Ultra. All of the inmates were subjected to a horrific array of experimentation, from electroshock therapy, exposure to sarin gas, and hypnosis to drug-induced psychosis with drugs like LSD. One of the most infamous inmates that had ever went through the program was the infamous crime boss Whitey Bulger. He actually interviewed and recounted his experience with MK Ultra, and he had to say this, and I quote, "Total loss of appetite, hallucinations, the room would change in shape, hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We experienced horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls. Guys turning into skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into the head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane." End quote. So it's not out of the scope of possibility to think that the CIA would have some form of interest in UFOs. And in 1947, they started investigating them. They worked alongside the FBI and the US Air Force to study hundreds of cases regarding the UFO phenomena. Every year, they cycled through these hundreds of cases, ranging from strange lights in the sky to full-blown abduction cases. But most of the cases were eventually written off as nothing more than a case of mistaken identity because somebody had saw the U-2 stealth planes. The remainder of the cases were written off as not enough evidence to consider a valid claim. But if this was the case, then why did the CIA spend so much money running several disinformation campaigns regarding the UFO phenomena? Usually it would go something like this. Somebody would see a UFO or a UFO adjacent object and report it, and then they would meet with a CIA agent. The agent would tell the person that I am a CIA agent and I will tell you everything that I know about UFOs in exchange for everything that you know. But what the eyewitness didn't know is that these were often fabricated stories. During this time, multiple people reported being harassed, stalked, and had their homes broken into by the CIA if they didn't cooperate. The black suits, intimidation tactics, and almost omnipotent level of knowledge about the eyewitnesses almost fits the bill a little bit too well for what's reported of the men in black. However, none of these people reported a supposed alien-like behavior whenever they had these interactions. So this got me curious, and I decided to hop online to see if anybody had any sort of encounter with what they thought could have been the men in black. One user had this to say. As a contractor who works as a programmer in places that sometimes have doors that check your security clearance level just to open them, I can say yes, I have. But they aren't alien guarding super spies. In fact, they're very creepy because they rarely talk and they do seriously odd stuff. You'll see them go to a workstation, sit down and use it, and then the workstation is no longer sitting there in the morning and techs are replacing it with a new computer. CIA and such will talk to you, act like normal people. These dudes don't even try. They don't acknowledge you, and they rarely appear. You don't see the same one twice. They're probably CIA or some other agency, just with different behaviors based on their specific job. It seems that if the men in black are real, of all the organizations that we've looked at, the CIA would be the most likely to have involvement. However, according to the CIA's official website, They began to withdraw their interest in UFOs as far back as the 50s, but they did continue to study them for another 30 or 40 years after the fact. Most of the stories that were reported about seeing a UFO at this point have simply been written off as sightings of U-2 planes. But during this time, it still was kind of weird that they chose to use UFOs as the disinformation story. So there may be a method to the madness. In this excerpt that I'm about to show you from an interview with ex-Air Force intelligence officer Richard Doty, he claims that he lied about the existence of UFOs to cover up the existence of an experimental laser after it was accidentally discovered by a member of the National Guard.
I had a job to do. I wasn't a maverick. I just didn't go out and do this on my own. My supervisors told me, listen, we don't want him to go out to the public, go on camera and say, hey, I just tapped into a secret laser on Kirtland Air Force Base. Obviously, we can't have that happen. So all I had to do was say, well, you know what, Paul? Maybe what you did see was UFOs.
It seems like UFOs and the Men in Black have a complex history wrapped in a web of disinformation. There doesn't really seem to be any mention of them before the 1960s when Albert K. Bender released his story about them. So did his story shed light on a situation that was well hidden, or did he create an urban legend of some kind? And if this is an urban legend, then what about the hundreds of eyewitness reports and first-hand encounters with the Men in Black? Are these people simply experiencing mass hysteria, falsely identifying government agents, or are they telling the truth? And if they are telling the truth, are the Men in Black so secretive that their very existence is a scary story? Whatever the case might be, one thing is for sure. The next time that you see something you can't quite explain, or you hear a bump in the night, you might just be the next person getting a visit from the Men in Black. Hey guys, Alex here. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so that you don't miss notifications for when I post future videos. I'd really like to hear from you on what you thought about the Men in Black and some of their possible origins, so feel free to comment those down below and I'll read through them. You can also get important show updates as well as cool little behind the scenes and Easter eggs over at my socials that I'll put at the bottom of the video here. I also stream on Twitch on Fridays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we pretty much just hang out, watch spooky videos, occasionally we game, and it's a good time. If you want any of your stories to be featured on our upcoming episodes of listener submissions, you can send your stories to oddencounterspodcast@gmail.com. Until then, stay safe and keep your eyes out for anything unexplained.